Not all endangered species are as cute as the red panda or as economically important as the honeybee. Nevertheless, the preservation of every species is equally important to biological diversity. However, every ecosystem has its villain. The American chaffseed is hemiparasitic, meaning that while it can perform photosynthesis, it also steals some of its nourishment from its neighboring plant species, specifically golden aster, dog fennel, and narrowleaf silkgrass. The organ that the chaffseed uses to retrieve these nutrients is called the haustorium. How would you feel if your neighbor hired someone to set your house on fire? The fire burns down the understory and woody vegetation in this ecosystem, but a villain like the chaffseed thrives from this destruction. The plant only flowers when a controlled fire or natural fire in late winter or early spring occurs. In Alabama, the plant does not flower until the first or second week of May. The fire stimulates rapid stem growth and flower production. Schwalbea americana is the only species in its genus. This eudicot belongs to the order Lamialis along mint and snapdragons, and is in the Orobanchaceae family. The American chaffseed contains yellowish tan seeds enclosed in a sac-like structure that bursts at maturity.
A lot is not known about the plant. It's interesting that the soils are not a limiting factor. I mean, you can find the plant where it's fairly moist, not really wet, but you can also find it in dry, sandy sites.
A great representation of the chaffseed's habitat would be a longleaf pine savanna.
Western part of the U.S., I mean, they have fire and that, but of course the climate is different. In many cases, it's much drier. It's just not the right climate. Sure, they have the fire, but they just don't have the proper levels of rainfall, precipitation on an annual basis, and at the right times they may get quite a bit of rainfall. For example, Southern California gets a lot of rainfall in the winter, but the chaffseed needs rainfall more evenly distributed throughout the year, and so that's probably one of the driving factors why it's restricted to the southeast or to the east as opposed to one that was apparently more common historically when we had a wider range of prescribed fire, and it historically occurred from Massachusetts all the way down the coast, Atlantic coast to then along the Gulf Coast to East Texas. So it was fairly widely distributed, but it's just very dependent upon that fire to keep woody vegetation.
The American chaffseed was listed September 29, 1992 as an endangered species. This species is currently found throughout New Jersey, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and Louisiana. Clearly, the American chaffseed is fighting for survival. Its population size and range of habitation have greatly declined over the last 26 years.
We currently have one occurrence here in Alabama, and that's to the south of Auburn, about an hour's drive. It's near Hurtsboro, to the west of Hurtsboro, and it's a nice population. It contains about 150 plants. It's not by any means the largest in the world, but it's the only one we have here in Alabama, and so we're extremely proud of the one we do have. The future goal for the plant in general is just to make sure it doesn't disappear, and so there are different avenues, there are different approaches that our people are taking in terms of the conservation efforts. It's divided into various groups. Some of it pertains to just land conservation, whether it's outright purchase of land or establishing easements with the owners. Anything that would help preserve the land is really important, but of course, when you have the land, you have to maintain it. And of course, as I mentioned, the plant needs fire. I mean, so you have to be able to institute prescribed fire in these areas. I mean, if you don't do the fire, having the land for this species, at least, it's not going to really help. And of course, that can be a complicated issue when you have urban interface. And fortunately, where the plant occurs here in Alabama, it's rural and and it's on a large plantation, and the owners, they have agreed to institute burning, and the burning is also a part. It's sort of de facto that they do the burning for quail, and so being that the chaff seed is there, it just gets it gets the benefits of the quail management.
Factors contributing to the decline in the population size include absence of habitat management, competition of other plant species, and habitat destruction.
There's quite a bit that's being learned, and fortunately, some of the botanical gardens, I think the Atlanta Botanical Garden, some other botanical gardens, I believe, they're trying to rear the plants from seeds, and apparently the plants are relatively easy to germinate, but it's just trying to find that host. Once they get to a stage, they'll need that host to help derive some of the nourishment. Public relations, and that's a big key. I mean, just preaching the gospel, telling people this is why we're protecting this site, because this plant is here, and it's one of the rarest plants in the world, and so that's why we're doing the burning. That's why we're trying to put conservation easements in place, and so it's all that. So it's that comes into play, and public outreach is really crucial, I think, and just telling people how neat this plant is, and how neat the habitat is, because it has the habitat where this chaff seed occurs. It has a lot of other really neat animals and plants, and it's just not the chaff seed. And of course, trying to bring all those together, you have plant conservation alliances that work with groups, and we have a plant conservation alliance here. There's one in Georgia, one in South Carolina, where the species has probably its greatest stronghold. And so these plant conservation alliances, they're like a consortium of agencies and organizations that all have one common goal, and that's just the simple one: to promote plant conservation of the rarest and the rare, rarest of the rare, rather. And so it's important to have these conservation alliances too. And being that this species is a federally protected species, it gets even more push from the federal government. So with all of those factors combined, we hope the plant has a fair chance of survival.
Given all of this evidence, doesn't the chaff seed deserve just as much attention in media and in conversations about endangered species conservation? As more well-known species, maybe the chaff seed's needs seem like a nuisance or a detriment to other species, but every species' presence is crucial to ecological diversity. And ultimately, every species is striving towards the same goal: to survive.
In terms of economic use, anything like that, we don't know of any. I mean, the plant is just so poorly known, and again, so rare. It just hasn't been really, time hasn't been invested into researching those type of things for this species. I mean, who knows? I mean, if they do conduct any kind of research in terms of utilitarian benefit, perhaps they could find something that it could be a cure for cancer. And that's the thing, we want to make sure all these species, plants and animals, are preserved, because, well, sure, they have their, there's potential for treatments for cancer or what have you, but I think, even from my standpoint, I think even more importantly, they have their own intrinsic value. They have a right to be here, just like all of us.